Well, hello there. Today we're going to talk about the PSFU metric, the product service fitness for use metric. This falls into place when we're looking at the chapter of product and services, chapter 3, started on page 27. The PSFU metric, it takes into the account that many of the services and the products that we consume, they are coupled. So say you have a smartphone, well, it's got a carrier, right? It's got a contract you got to sign. The people who supply the service and the network in order to for you to use that phone. The smartphone by itself is relatively useless. It might be a good calculator or a good phone, but in order to communicate with the net, you're going to have a carrier. A restaurant, you got food, and you've got table service, and you've got the whole atmosphere of the environment. How quick is the service? How well is the menu placed? All that sort of thing. So you see, we've got uh, a product with a service. And again, in travel, the actual product in traveling is the airplane, or the train, or the rental car. However, there's a plethora of logistics that go underlying that product that come into mind if a product or service is okay. If you like the service, if you like the product, those both have to be met. You can't have a great product and then have a bad service in order to have a successful experience. According to Juran, in order to meet his fitness for use criteria, both the services and the products must be free of deficiencies. Now, when we're talking about deficiencies, we're talking about serious uh, defectives. So you might be able to have like you might run out of peanuts on the plane. That's a defect, but it's a lot more a defective would be they oversold the plane and you weren't able to board, right? So that's it's a defective means it's a it's a it's a game changing experience of the product and service. It's not just a small defect. This is really hard to meet both of these together, these two fitness for use criteria. In the DMAC, where do we find the PSFU? Well, I would place the PSFU in the define, the measure, and the control phases. Because to define, we're trying to define the problem. We're taking the temperature of the actual state. Measure, we're measuring the actual state, and then perhaps we did a change, and we added more food to the menu, or we cleaned the bathrooms, or we fired that really obnoxious server, and then we want to take another uh, uh, PSFU to see if there was actually a change in the ratings. So in the control phase, it could be you're doing this as to check to see if you made the change, um, and if it made a dent in the bad report in the bad ratings, and also as a temperature gauge just to see, hey, how are we doing? How are we doing after you guys get to a stable stage and figure out, okay, well, we're getting a consistently good rating here, so now we're in the control phase. Here's some things that we should consider. The cost of poor quality. This is the main impetus for managing for quality is to eliminate defectives and defects from occurring. In fact, this is like one of the major definitions of Lean Six Sigma is to be defect free. So the problems we have with poor quality is that we only hear from around 90% of our unhappy customers. The other 10% of our unhappy customers don't even respond to us. And then for every of those complaints that we actually receive, there are around 25 customers who have similar problems. And you've seen this perhaps with an Amazon review where you see your review, wow, yeah, I had that a similar experience, but you wouldn't post that reply, or it hits to you, but you won't do anything about it because it's like, well, it's already been posted. This is why those Yelp and Amazon reviews are so important. Those peer reviews, because they speak to the people. If we can resolve the complaint, half of the customers who do complain will do business again with us. So if we can't actually address that problem, uh, half those customers will come back to us. If we can react quickly and we give the person at the front lines the power to make resolution, that number jumps to 95%. Um, we've all been through here. You call a call center and you talk to someone, and they overcharged you, or there was some kind of a problem, and they say, "I'm sorry, sir, but there's nothing I could do about it." And then you say, "Okay, what's the next logical thing?" "Well, let me talk to the supervisor." And you keep going down the food chain or up the food chain until you get to someone who can resolve it. However, they spend an hour and a half, 2 hours on the phone. Anybody who's done work with AT&T or Dish or DirecTV, you can be, there's this horror stories of people being online and on hold for hours trying to get resolution to a problem that could be resolved at the lowest level. So this is a case study for us to empower our employees at the lowest level to make things right. So if the server sees that there's a problem with the customer, at a restaurant, that they can resolve it at that level without having to go to the supervisor. So we're empowering our employees to address it at the where the problem's occurring right there, right now. And our dissatisfaction rate drops down to around 5%, which is what we which is ideal because we're not going to lose that customer. The average customer who has had a problem will tell 9 or 10 others about it. The customer who has a complaint resolved satisfactorily will only tell about 5 others. So that means is that if there is a problem that's unresolved, people will tell more people about the problem rather than if they had the problem resolved at the lowest level or resolved. So the thing is people will tell more people about the problem if we don't resolve it. So people will still tell, "Oh yeah, I had that issue with AT&T, or I had that issue with such and such place." However, they did resolve it. It's like they'll tell less. There'll be less impetus for them to talk to their friends about the experience if we can resolve it. And here is the kicker, right? So it it requires it costs a lot more to get new customers rather than to keep our current customers. That is why managing for quality is so important and economically wise. We need to engineer our processes to meet the needs of our current customers, and to coin the phrase of religion and pastors and stuff. They are our flock. We need to take care of our flock. So, what is Juran's Fitness for Use? This is a refresher. We went through this in lecture. The definition suggests that the we should view external and internal perspectives of the product and service. So that is to say, number one, the product performance results in customer satisfaction. Now, satisfaction is a loaded word, right? So it could be really satisfied, you could be just mildly satisfied. So it's a very vague word, but basically just says the product does what it says it's going to do. So like a big pen is as long as that cheap 25-cent pen, you pick it up, you take the cap off, and you can write with it. It's got ink. Hey, it's performing the what it's said to do, which is to write. Now, if you take a really expensive pen that's been engraved, you got it from your grandma or whatever, and it's got refillable inks, you pick that pen up, you write on it, it does the same function. but you're satisfied. So the satisfaction level on both is at some level that's met at the same time. So you might be overly satisfied riding with that more expensive pen because it has a lot more features. But however, as long as the pens write and produce ink, then they'll produce satisfactions. They're doing what they said they're going to do. The product has to be free of deficiencies. So when we're talking about deficiencies, we're talking about defective products, defective services, something that happens where the product or service is unusable. This creates customer dissatisfaction. So the measurement of quality, according to Juran, is freedom of deficiencies. And this is actually a metric we're going to be using later on in Lean Six Sigma metrics. It's relatively the same as the defect per unit metric, which tells us that the frequency of deficiencies divided by the opportunities for deficiencies, and then we convert that to a percentage, that equals quality. So let's give an example. So let's say we program 15,000 lines of code. Of those 15,000 lines, 387 lines were defective, which means the code failed and you'd have to go in and you'd have to clean it. And this is something that happened, the customer caught. So what is the FOD for your programming? Well, we have 387, that's the frequency, divided by 15,000, which is the opportunities, which equals 0.0258. Now, if we subtract that from 1, basically convert it to a percentage, we're looking at a 97% FOD. So what does that mean? 90% of your program is defective free, while 3% of your program is defective. So the question is this a good thing? So if you got a 97% on your test, you might say, man, I'm rocking, that's awesome. However, you're letting 3% of their products be defective. So when we're managing for quality, 3% defective is not good. Just keep in mind that Lean Six Sigma, you're defining almost perfection as being the acceptable quality level. If we're accepting the 3% defective, then we're accepting the 3% acceptable quality level, which allows 3% defectives to go through. That might not be a good thing depending on what we're doing. Say if you're doing vaccines, a 3% defective rate is not good, right? So we got to just be cognizant of that this particular metric is we got to take it kind of in light of what it is. It's basically just telling us that, yeah, this is how much you're doing, this is how much you're doing badly. So I came up with this PSFU metric, which basically illustrates the power of the FOD and Juran's fitness for use. So it's in the Canvas. You can fill this out. So you're going to survey a recent experience, either an airlines experience, a travel. It could be a restaurant. It could be your recent phone purchase. It could be a recent house purchase, a recent car purchase. Something that was relatively recent that you can remember. You can, oh yeah, I remember this, I remember that. So what we're simply doing is we're looking at the product and we're looking at the service dimensions. And again, this is all expressed in the book that you can go over more. But just quickly recap that we're looking at the product dimensions and we're looking at the service dimensions. And so again, the product dimensions: performance, features, reliability. Conformance, does it doing what it says it's supposed to do? Durability, does it last? Serviceability, aesthetics. And then you have the service dimensions: time, duration, timeliness, completeness, courtesy, consistency, accessibility, accuracy, and responsiveness. So those are all the service dimensions. And so what we're going to do is, if it 2 means you're going to give it a 2 if it exceeds your expectations, which means is that it's a delighter. You bought that dress and it's got pockets, right? That's a delighter. So it exceeds your expectations. You didn't know it had that when you were buying it. Number 1, it just means that, hey, this product said it would product or service, it did what it said it was going to do. Yeah, I received my food on time. Yeah, um, the bathrooms were clean. So it just basically means, yeah, it met my expectations. Zero means there was no expectations were not met. So what we do is on the total, on the P product total rating, you add up the exceeds expectations and the meet expectations. You don't add up the zero on the unmet, because if you have a zero on the unmet, that means that you're not going to, there's no rating on there. But we want to assign that if there was any of those dimensions in the product or service that were defective, which means they were unusable, they were so bad that they ruined the whole experience, you give it a zero there. So on that, you'll see where it says 4, that's the addition of all of the sum of all the expectations. You've got the 1 here, which is the sum of all of the unmet expectations. And here you're either going to have a 0 or you're going to have a 1. So if any of these were defective, you're going to put a 0. You could have 5 things defective, and this would still be 0. If there was no defective on these, nothing that was defective on these dimensions, then you'd put a 1. Then you add it up. So obviously, if it's a 0, 4 times 5 times 0 would equal 0, but this is 4 times 5 times 1, this is 20. So you can see here we have 4, 4, which would be 16, but we had some defective issues there. And this one was defective on completeness and consistency. So this rated a 0. So you can see here that at the end, we want to make sure we have either a 0 or a 1, and then that would affect the PD rating. So this particular service was a real service I did. It was a dish network, which I live in the country, so I can't get cable. So we have to get satellite. So I had the 4 times 5 on the PD, which would be 20, and then I had 4 times 4, which is 0, and 0, which is 0. So that tells me that in the service dimensions, I had some defective things going wrong, which negated all of those potential service ratings. So in the end, my fitness for use by PSFU metric would be a 20. So I came up with this criteria here. In the real world, you might want to change this to whatever you feel would meet your criteria. For that particular process that you're evaluating. But a 20 here would be, well, it's good. It's just borderline good and above average. It's really close to the meet expectations. Yeah, I'll return. I'll maybe have some referrals. What we want to do is we want to get to the exceed expectations, definite referrals. We do not want to get to the do not meet expectations because we'll lose the customer. We'll definitely have some referrals, and if a failure, we'll have at least bad 5 referrals and a future loss of business. So really, this is the red area where we do not want to be. However, it'd be interesting to see with the company or the service and the company, the product, and the service that you guys are going to evaluate where they fall. So had the dish performed well on the service, that they would have had a total of a 36, which would have meant they would exceed my expectations, and I definitely would have referrals from delighted customers, because the best way to really get business is by company or customer referrals. Hope that makes sense. Just key points here: the PSFU metric. Note that any presence of a defective product or service dimension drastically affects the total rating. So this is where we're getting into those 2 criteria for the product and service, right? Or for the freedom of deficiencies. Product has to do what it says it's going to do, and also it has to be defective free. Juran's fitness for use requires a product to meet customer satisfaction while being defect free. And that is it. Good luck on your assignment, and I hope you have an experience that is not defective.